From ancient Egyptian tombs to modern Amish homesteads, humans have been mastering the art of food preservation for thousands of years. While it might sound like something only professional chefs or your super skilled grandmother could handle, preserving food is surprisingly simple. In fact, your body has been quietly thanking you every time you've eaten pickles, sauerkraut, or any other preserved foods. These age-old techniques don't just keep food fresh, they create powerful probiotics that boost your gut health. And who better to learn these simple techniques from than the Amish, who have been perfecting these methods for generations. They've stripped away the complexity and kept only what works, turning food preservation into something anyone can do right in their kitchen. In a world where we're increasingly disconnected from our food sources, preserving food is a way to reconnect with ancient traditions and take control of what we eat. Plus, when you preserve food yourself, you know exactly what's in it. No mysterious ingredients or artificial preservatives needed, and it tastes even better. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty of water bath canning, let's understand what makes this Amish preservation method so effective. Water bath canning has kept families fed through winters for generations, and while modern folks might think it requires special skills, the Amish approach proves otherwise. The science behind it packs a serious punch while staying remarkably simple. The boiling water creates a hostile environment for spoilage-causing bacteria. Meanwhile, the intense heat pushes air out of the jars, and as they cool, nature works its magic, creating a vacuum seal that keeps your food fresh for months. Now, here's something crucial the Amish learned long ago. You can't just can everything that grows in your garden. This method works best with high-acid foods, juicy tomatoes, summer berries, tree fruits, and properly pickled vegetables. The acidity acts as an extra layer of protection, keeping your preserved foods safe to eat. When it comes to vegetables, the Amish don't take shortcuts. Vegetables are naturally low in acid, so they must be pickled in a vinegar solution before canning in order to raise the acidity. Those processing times you see in Amish recipes, they're not random numbers. Different foods need different durations. Pickles might need 10 minutes, while that batch of strawberry jam requires 15. The real beauty of proper canning reveals itself weeks later. While modern preservation methods might keep food edible, water bath canning transforms it. Those dilly beans get snappier, pickles develop complex flavors, and fruit preserves mature into something that makes ordinary toast extraordinary. The Amish know that patience pays off, though they'll admit that their best preserves rarely last until spring. Getting started with water bath canning requires some basic equipment, but don't worry, most of these items are probably already hiding in your kitchen cabinets. First on your list is a large water bath canner or any deep stock pot that's tall enough to submerge your jars with an extra inch of water on top. The Amish have been using the same sturdy pots for generations. They know that fancy equipment doesn't make better preserves. You'll need some essential tools that make the process safer and more efficient. A canning rack keeps your jars from dancing around on the bottom of the pot, though the Amish often use a simple folded towel when racks aren't available. Jar lifters are like heavy-duty tongs designed specifically for grabbing hot jars. They're worth their weight in gold when you're dealing with boiling water. A wide-mouth funnel prevents spills and keeps your jar rims clean, crucial for proper sealing. Round up some clean dish towels, a sturdy ladle, and a plastic spatula for removing air bubbles. Now, about those jars, the Amish insist on proper canning jars with two-piece lids, the flat lid and the screw band. No recycled mayonnaise jars here. Proper canning jars are tempered to withstand the heat and pressure of processing. Check each jar carefully for any nicks or cracks, especially around the rim. Even the tiniest imperfection can prevent a proper seal. The preparation phase is where many beginners rush, but the Amish know better. Start by washing your jars in hot, soapy water. Even if they look clean, this step removes any dust or residue that could prevent proper sealing. Then comes sterilization. Submerge those jars in water and bring it to a boil for 10 minutes. Keep them hot until you're ready to fill them. Sudden temperature changes can crack the glass. Your lids need special attention too. Modern two-piece lids can't be reused for canning, though the bands can, so start with fresh ones. The Amish method for preparing lids is foolproof. Place them in a pan of very hot but not boiling water. This softens the sealing compound without damaging it. Let them stay in the hot water until you're ready to use them. While your jars are sterilizing, fill your canning pot halfway with water and start heating it. The Amish time management technique comes in handy here. You want the water hot but not quite boiling when you're ready to add filled jars. This prevents that nerve-wracking wait for water to heat up while your prepared food sits getting cold. Here's a pro tip straight from Amish kitchens. Arrange your workspace before you start preparing any food. Have your tools within arm's reach, your towels ready for spills, and your surface clean and cleared. Position your hot water pot, your cooling area, a towel-lined counter, and your filling station in a logical workflow. The Amish are masters of efficiency. They know that scrambling for equipment with hot jars waiting is both dangerous and likely to lead to mistakes. Temperature management is crucial throughout this process. The Amish have learned through experience that maintaining steady temperatures prevents jar breakage and ensures proper sealing. Keep your clean jars hot, your lids warm, and your canning pot simmering. Now that your equipment is ready, it's time for the most critical phase of water bath canning. This is where the Amish attention to detail really shines through. Start by retrieving your hot jars from their sterilizing bath, keeping them upright to prevent contamination. The Amish prefer using jar lifters for this task, but if you don't have one, sturdy tongs wrapped with rubber bands provide a secure grip. Place the jars on a clean, dry towel, never directly on a cold counter, as the temperature shock could crack them. Before filling each jar, the Amish add their signature flavoring ingredients. For dill pickles, drop in a crushed garlic clove, half a teaspoon of dill seeds, and if you're feeling adventurous, some red pepper flakes for heat. These aromatics infuse through the preserve over time, creating complex flavors that just can't be rushed. Different recipes call for different additions, maybe a bay leaf for tomatoes or a cinnamon stick for fruit preserves. Now comes the filling process. Your preserving solution, whether it's a vinegar brine for pickles or syrup for fruits, should be at a rolling boil. Using a wide-mouth funnel and ladle, fill each jar with your prepared food. The Amish method ensures proper packing density, not too loose, not too tight. With pickles or whole vegetables, press them in firmly, but leave enough space for the brine to circulate. For jam or crushed tomatoes, fill to leave proper headspace, typically 1/4 inch for jams and 1/2 inch for vegetables. Here's a crucial step many people skip: removing air bubbles. Take your plastic spatula, never metal as it could scratch the jar, and slide it between the food and the jar's side, working your way around. You'll be surprised how many bubbles rise to the surface. Top off with more hot brine or syrup if needed to maintain proper headspace. The Amish know that trapped air bubbles can interfere with proper sealing and processing. Before adding the lids, wipe each jar rim meticulously with a clean, damp cloth. Even a tiny food particle or bit of grease can prevent a proper seal. Remove the warm lids from their water bath using tongs or a magnetic lid lifter and center them carefully on each jar. Screw on the bands finger tight, a term that confuses many beginners. The Amish describe it perfectly. Tighten just until you feel resistance, then turn about a 1/4 inch more. Too tight and air can't escape during processing. Too loose and water could seep in. Loading jars into the canner requires careful attention. If you're using a rack, arrange the jars so they don't touch each other or the pot sides. Lower the rack slowly to prevent water from splashing into the jars. Without a rack, place jars on your folded towel in the pot, again keeping them separate. The water should cover the jars by at least 1 inch. Add more boiling water if needed. Once the water returns to a full rolling boil, start your timer. This is where the Amish precision pays off. Processing time varies by recipe, jar size, and altitude. Don't start counting until the water is at a full boil, and maintain that boil throughout processing. Keep a kettle of hot water ready in case you need to top up the pot. When your timer signals the end of processing, resist the urge to immediately remove the jars. The Amish have learned that a gradual cooling process significantly improves your success rate. Turn off the heat and let the jars rest in the hot water for 5 minutes. This resting period helps prevent liquid loss from the jars, a problem known as siphoning that can interfere with proper sealing. After the rest period, lift your jars straight up and out of the water. Keep them level. Tilting can break the seal that's starting to form. The Amish always emphasize this step's importance. Dripping water on sealed lids can compromise the seal, so lift each jar straight up and hold it slightly tilted to let water run off the lid, not into the sealing area. Place your jars on a thick towel or wooden board in a draft-free spot. The Amish traditionally use thick wool blankets or several layers of towels to prevent rapid temperature changes. Leave at least an inch of space between jars to allow air circulation. This is where you'll start hearing that satisfying ping sound as the lids seal. Though not all jars seal with an audible pop, so don't worry if you miss it. Now comes the hardest part, leaving them alone for 24 hours. No tilting, no checking the seals, no tightening the bands. The Amish know that patience during this period is crucial. The sealing process continues long after the jars leave the water bath, and disturbing them can interfere with proper seal formation. Keep kids and curious cooks away from the cooling jars. After 24 hours, it's time for the final inspection. Remove the bands first. They've done their job and aren't needed for storage. Check each seal by pressing the center of the lid. It should be concave and firmly attached. Try to lift the lid with your fingertips without the band on. If it stays put, you've got a good seal. The Amish also check for any spurting or leakage around the rims when pressing the lid center. Look at the jar contents too. The liquid should still cover the food, though some settling is normal. The color should be consistent with no unusual discoloration. If you spot darkening at the top of the jar, or if the liquid is cloudy, these could be signs of spoilage. The Amish never take chances with questionable seals or suspicious appearances. When in doubt, throw it out. For the jars that passed inspection, wipe them clean with a slightly damp cloth to remove any residue or watermarks. The Amish often write the date and contents on the lid with a permanent marker. Simple but effective organization. Some even include details like the recipe variation or the garden the produce came from. Storage location matters significantly. The Amish typically use root cellars, but any cool, dark, dry place works well. Avoid places with temperature fluctuations like near the stove or in direct sunlight. Properly stored jars maintain their quality for at least a year, though the Amish note that most preserved foods are best used within that first year. Keep your sealed jars stored without the bands. This might seem counterintuitive, but it allows you to easily spot any seals that break during storage. If you must replace the bands for stacking or transportation, make sure they're completely dry and loosely attached. Now that we know how to preserve our vegetables and fruits, it's time to move on to meat. Before we jump into the hands-on process, let's understand why this ancient method has stood the test of time. When the Amish preserve meat with salt, they're tapping into a process that's both amazingly simple and scientifically brilliant. It's one of those rare techniques where less really is more. No fancy equipment, no complex measurements, just pure know-how passed down through generations. The science behind salt preservation reads like a natural magic trick. It transforms fresh meat into something that not only lasts longer, but develops entirely new flavors along the way. While modern preservation often focuses on just keeping food from spoiling, the Amish method actually improves the meat over time, creating complex flavors that you simply can't get any other way. Here's where it gets interesting. Salt preservation isn't just about drying out the meat. It sets off a chain of natural processes that would make any food scientist grin with appreciation. The salt creates an environment where nature does most of the heavy lifting, while harmful bacteria don't stand a chance. Meanwhile, beneficial changes are taking place that enhance both safety and taste. But the most important thing when salting your meat is selecting the salt. Simplicity is key. The ingredient list should read like a one-word story: salt. The beauty of the Amish approach to meat preservation lies in its simplicity. Unlike modern preservation methods that require a shopping list longer than your arm, you only need 3 things: quality meat, a large container, and pure salt. Let's break this down to ensure you're starting with the right supplies. First, your container needs to be large enough to hold your meat comfortably with some extra space. The Amish traditionally use wooden boxes or food-grade plastic containers. Either works fine as long as it's clean and sturdy. The crucial feature isn't the material, but the size. Your meat should be able to lie flat without touching the sides. Think of it as giving your meat a spacious but cozy home for the next few days. When it comes to salt, this is where many people go wrong. Head to your local store and start reading those labels. You're looking for salt with exactly one ingredient listed: sodium chloride. No iodine, no anti-caking agents, no fancy minerals added. The Amish insist on this purity because additives can interfere with the preservation process. Kosher salt or pure sea salt are your best bets. Now for the actual preservation process. The Amish approach might seem almost too casual to modern eyes. There's no weighing, no measuring, no precise calculations. Instead, they follow a beautifully simple principle. Take your meat and cover it completely with salt. Every surface gets treated, and whatever sticks naturally is exactly what you need. It's like giving your meat a salt shower. Be generous, but don't force more salt to stick than wants to. Here's a critical step that many beginners miss: placing the meat on a cooling rack inside your container. This isn't just about keeping things tidy, it's essential for proper preservation. As the salt does its work, it'll draw moisture from the meat. That liquid needs somewhere to go, and you don't want your meat sitting in its own brine. The rack creates the perfect elevation, letting gravity help with the process. Once your meat is properly salted and positioned on the rack, it's time to find the right storage spot. The Amish traditionally use ice houses or root cellars, but don't worry if you don't have either. Your refrigerator will work just fine. The key is maintaining a consistently cool temperature. Place the container in your fridge, making sure it's level and stable. Now comes the waiting game. 5 days is your target, though you might need more or less time depending on the size and thickness of your meat. The Amish way is to let nature tell you when it's ready. Watch for the liquid seeping out of the meat to slow down or stop completely. This usually takes about 5 days, but trust your eyes rather than the calendar. When the moisture stops pooling at the bottom of your container, you're ready for the next step. After those 5 days of patient waiting, we've reached the exciting part, checking if your preservation efforts have paid off. Pick up your meat, and the first thing you'll notice is the dramatic change in texture. What started as soft, pliable flesh should now feel notably firm and rigid, almost like a well-done steak that's been left to cool. This firmness isn't just a surface change, it indicates that the salt has penetrated deeply and done its preservation work properly. Run your hands over the surface. The meat should feel significantly more dense and compact than when you started. The Amish tradition teaches that properly cured meat should feel almost like a piece of hardwood, solid but not completely inflexible. If any spots still feel squishy or unusually soft, that's a red flag indicating uneven salt penetration. Those pieces might need more time with fresh salt. Now comes a step that might seem counterintuitive, rinsing off all that salt you so carefully applied. Using cool, clean water, thoroughly rinse every surface of the meat. The Amish emphasize the importance of this step. You're not trying to wash away the salt that's already penetrated the meat. You're removing the excess surface salt that could make your final product too salty to enjoy. Be thorough, but gentle. You're not scrubbing, just rinsing. After rinsing, grab yourself a non-linty towel. Old cotton dish towels work perfectly. Pat the meat dry with careful attention to every nook and cranny. The Amish stress the importance of this drying step. Any remaining moisture could lead to unwanted mold growth during the hanging process. Take your time here. Proper drying is crucial for success. Next comes a step that requires a steady hand, creating a small hole in the corner of your meat for hanging. Choose a spot near one edge, ideally through a section of fat, if present. The hole should be just large enough to accommodate your S-shaped hook. The Amish traditionally use hand-forged hooks passed down through generations, but any food-safe hook will do as long as it's strong enough to support the weight of your meat. The final step involves finding the perfect spot to hang your meat. You're looking for a location that maintains a steady temperature between 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, the Amish sweet spot for proper aging. This space should also be dark, as light can affect the quality of your preserved meat. While the Amish might use dedicated smokehouses or special corners of their cellars, you can create a suitable environment in a basement or cool closet. The key is consistent temperature and good air circulation. Hang the meat so it's not touching any walls or other surfaces. The Amish typically leave their meat hanging for at least 5 days in these conditions, allowing it to develop those complex flavors that make salt-preserved meat so special. During this time, you might notice the meat developing a slightly darker exterior. This is normal and actually desirable, indicating proper aging. When your meat has completed its hanging time, you'll have a preserved product that can last for months when stored properly. The Amish test for readiness by looking for a uniformly firm texture and a rich, deep color throughout the meat. At this point, your preserved meat is ready for storage or use, a testament to the effectiveness of this simple but powerful preservation method. Before diving into jars and brine, let's understand what makes fermentation a cornerstone of Amish food preservation. This isn't just an old-fashioned method, it's a process that transforms ordinary vegetables into nutrient-rich foods that can last months without refrigeration. Here's something remarkable. About 30% of foods worldwide undergo fermentation. From your morning coffee to chocolate, fermented foods are everywhere. The Amish have maintained these traditional methods because they work incredibly well and create uniquely delicious flavors. The science is beautifully simple. Beneficial bacteria convert the natural sugars in vegetables into lactic acid. This acid acts as a natural preservative while creating those distinctive tangy flavors. You can ferment almost anything from your garden. Cabbage becomes sauerkraut, cucumbers transform into pickles, and even plain carrots develop complex, interesting tastes. Temperature and salt play crucial roles in successful fermentation. The Amish aim for 65 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, warm enough for beneficial bacteria to thrive, but cool enough to prevent unwanted growth. Salt isn't just for flavor, it creates the perfect environment for good bacteria while deterring the harmful ones. The best part? Fermentation actually makes food more nutritious. Those beneficial bacteria create vitamins and probiotics that support gut health, while breaking down compounds that can make raw vegetables hard to digest. It's nature's way of making good food even better. Let's gather everything you'll need for successful fermentation. And trust me, there's beauty in how simple this supply list is. First up are your vessels, wide-mouth mason jars or traditional fermentation crocks. The Amish prefer crocks passed down through generations, but clean glass jars work perfectly fine. Whatever you choose, make sure it's spotlessly clean, though you don't need to go overboard with sterilization like in canning. Your salt choice matters enormously here. Just like with meat preservation, you're looking for pure salt without additives. Iodized table salt is a definite no-go. It can turn your ferments dark and bitter. Sea salt or kosher salt with no anti-caking agents is your best bet. The Amish have a straightforward measurement that stood the test of time. 3 large tablespoons of salt for every 5 pounds of vegetables. Though it's better to look this up since it's different for each recipe. Water quality can make or break your ferment. The Amish traditionally use spring water, but if that's not available, filtered water works great. Avoid tap water if possible. The chlorine can interfere with the beneficial bacteria you're trying to cultivate. If tap water is your only option, let it sit out overnight to allow the chlorine to evaporate. Now for your vegetables, freshness is absolutely crucial. The Amish typically ferment vegetables the same day they're harvested, and for good reason. The fresher your produce, the more natural bacteria are present to kickstart fermentation. Choose vegetables that are firm, unblemished, and at their peak ripeness. If you're buying from a store, select organic when possible to avoid any preservatives that might inhibit fermentation. You'll also need something to keep your vegetables submerged under the brine. While modern fermenters might use specialized weights, the Amish have cleverly used what's available. A clean stone or a cabbage leaf works perfectly. Some even use a small plate that fits inside the jar. The goal is to keep everything under the brine where the good bacteria can work their magic. Preparation is key to success. Start by cleaning your workspace thoroughly. The Amish know that cleanliness prevents unwanted bacteria from crashing the fermentation party. Wash your vegetables well, but avoid using soap or vegetable washes. Plain water is all you need. You don't want to wash away all the beneficial bacteria naturally present on the vegetable surfaces. When it comes to cutting your vegetables, size matters. The Amish typically cut cabbage for sauerkraut into thin, uniform strips about the thickness of a quarter. For cucumbers, they might leave them whole for crunchy pickles or slice them for a faster ferment. Whatever size you choose, consistency is key. Pieces should be roughly the same size to ensure even fermentation. Making your brine solution follows that time-tested salt ratio we mentioned earlier. Dissolve your salt in unchlorinated water until it's completely clear. The Amish test for proper saltiness with a simple trick. A fresh egg should float in properly salted brine, or if you prefer, a clean potato should barely peek above the surface. It's not scientifically precise, but it's worked reliably for generations. Now comes one of the most crucial parts of fermentation: packing your vegetables properly. The Amish have perfected this art through generations, and their methods ensure consistent results every time. Start by placing your prepared vegetables in your clean jar or crock, but resist the urge to just dump them in. Instead, add them layer by layer, pressing down firmly with clean hands or a wooden tamper after each addition. The traditional Amish cabbage leaf method is brilliantly simple, yet effective. Save a few whole, clean outer leaves from your cabbage. These will serve as a natural barrier between your shredded vegetables and the surface of the brine. Tuck these leaves on top of your packed vegetables, letting them curve up slightly along the sides of your container. This creates a sort of natural seal that helps keep everything submerged. If you're not using the cabbage leaf method, clean stones make excellent weights. The Amish often keep special fermentation stones that are used solely for this purpose. Make sure to boil the stone for 10 minutes before each use to ensure cleanliness. Place it directly on top of your vegetables. It should be heavy enough to keep everything submerged, but not so heavy that it crushes your carefully packed produce. For those without access to suitable stones, there's a clever modern alternative the Amish have come to accept: a plastic bag filled halfway with brine, not water in case it leaks. This method is especially useful for wide-mouthed jars. The bag conforms to the shape of your vegetables while keeping them submerged. Just make sure to use a new, clean zip-top bag. Proper headspace is critical for successful fermentation. The Amish typically leave about 2 to 3 inches of space between the brine surface and the top of the container. This accommodates the bubbling that occurs during active fermentation and prevents overflow. Too little headspace leads to messy counters. Too much can increase the risk of unwanted mold growth. Temperature control significantly influences your fermentation success. The ideal range is between 65 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 18 to 22 degrees Celsius, and the Amish are masters at finding the perfect spot in their homes. A basement corner often works well, or any location away from direct sunlight and heat sources. During summer months, they might move ferments to root cellars where temperatures remain more stable. The location needs to be accessible because you'll be checking your ferments daily. The Amish recommend keeping ferments in a dark place, but one that you can easily reach for monitoring. A kitchen cabinet works well as long as it's not next to your stove or dishwasher where temperatures fluctuate. You'll know fermentation is underway when you start seeing bubbles rising to the surface, usually within 24 to 48 hours. This is what the Amish call the living sign, and it's your first indicator that everything is proceeding as it should. The brine will begin to cloud slightly, and you might notice a slightly sour but pleasant aroma developing. These are all positive signs that your beneficial bacteria are hard at work. Once your fermentation is underway, daily maintenance becomes your key to success. The Amish approach to monitoring ferments combines careful observation with all your senses. Every day, preferably at the same time, you'll need to check on your fermenting vegetables. This isn't just about preventing problems, it's about developing an understanding of how fermentation progresses. Let's talk about burping your jars, a crucial daily task if you're using sealed containers. The fermentation process produces carbon dioxide, which needs to be released to prevent pressure buildup. Simply open the lid briefly, listen for that satisfying fizzy sound, and close it back up. The Amish traditionally use open crocks that don't need burping, but if you're using mason jars, this daily release of gases is essential. A useful tip: place your jars in a shallow dish to catch any overflow that might occur during this process. The timeline for fermentation varies, but expect a minimum of 5 days, with most ferments reaching their peak between 1 to 2 weeks. Temperature plays a huge role here. Warmer conditions speed up the process, while cooler temperatures slow it down. The Amish don't rush this process. They know that slower fermentation often develops more complex flavors. Now, how do you know when your ferment is ready? The Amish rely on 3 key indicators. First, taste. Start sampling your ferment after the 5th day. You're looking for a pleasantly sour flavor without any hint of sweetness. The taste should be tangy, but not overwhelmingly acidic. Take small tastes daily to track the developing flavors. The second indicator is smell. A properly fermented vegetable should have a clean, sour aroma. If you detect any off-putting odors, anything reminiscent of rotten eggs, or a truly foul smell, something has gone wrong. The Amish say that your nose knows. Trust your sense of smell, as it's often the first indicator of problems. Visual cues provide your third checkpoint. The brine should be cloudy but not slimy. Some white yeast floating on top is perfectly normal and can be skimmed off. The Amish don't worry about this at all. However, if you see any fuzzy growth or unusual colors, pink, orange, or black, that's a sign to start over. Remember, yeast is white and powdery, while mold is fuzzy and colored. Storage temperature becomes critical once your ferment reaches the desired flavor. The Amish traditionally move their finished ferments to root cellars, where temperatures stay between 32 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 to 10 degrees Celsius. This slows down the fermentation process without stopping it completely. In modern homes, the refrigerator works perfectly fine. Just remember that fermentation continues even in cold storage, albeit very slowly. Common issues have simple solutions. If your vegetables float above the brine, adjust your weight. If the brine tastes too salty, note it for next time. But don't add water now, as it could dilute the protective acidity. If things taste too sour, your ferment might be ready earlier than expected. The Amish approach to troubleshooting is proactive. Catch problems early through daily monitoring, and most issues can be prevented before they start.